Okay. Right, so we are live. So thank you guys so much for hopping in for a little bit here. I'm going to go over this video. I've already seen it, but I wanted just to highlight some extra points in it too. And I think there are a lot of things I don't remember either. So I just want to watch this with you guys. This is why Americans should move to Japan. And I think there's a lot of reasons why they should and shouldn't. So we'll find out what he has to say, and then I'll respond as I moved to Japan about a year ago.
Don't get me wrong, I'm not gonna just say America is too bad and Japan is much better. Actually, I could also tell Americans many reasons not to move to Japan if you want to hear. But I wanna be fair. I don't wanna just say the negative aspect only. The truth is, I think there are so many benefits, specifically for Americans when they move to here. But first, I do need
That's actually really true. There are a lot of really good benefits when you first arrive. There are also some really hard things as well. One of the biggest problems is actually getting a place to live. So, but we'll see what he has to talk about, and we'll go over each point.
clarify this. Every time I say Americans or generalizing statement, it does not apply to every single American in the US. That's impossible. So keep in mind, it's just my personal experience with the majority of Americans in the US in comparison to Japanese people. So what I'm gonna talk about is more like cultural things, not people individuals. Without any further ado, these are the possible reasons for Americans why they should move to Japan. Number 10. Transportation. It just comes down to the fact the United States is too big and you do need a car pretty much anywhere you live. But in Japan, on the other hand, transportation is everywhere. So even if you are in a countryside, I bet you are never far away from pretty much anywhere you wanna go. I say this because especially if...
Yeah, that is so absolutely true. When I was living in Texas and I had to drive, like Texas is really bad about this too. Like you have to drive 40 minutes just to get to the grocery store. Here in Japan, I have 4 grocery stores, all within walking distance. The closest one is, no, I have 5. The closest one is 5 minutes. After that's 10 minutes, then 15 minutes.
If you like traveling, this is a great benefit, right? You can travel around without a car. This is almost impossible in most states of America. But in Japan, you can easily do it. Not only that, transportation in Japan is much more clean, punctual, and efficient. Not to mention people follow the rules and they are quiet.
Okay, they mostly follow the rules. There's been a lot of cases, especially when you get into like the school times. Like so when in the middle of the day, if kids have a break or if they're going to a club or whatever, if a lot of kids are on the train, then it can be really, really annoying. But there's always the token oji-san to go and yell at people. So that usually can be covered very easily. Somebody else will go and say something. And I will say that it is a lot more efficient, and it is really, it's not overtly expensive, and especially now that we have like a lot of the go to travel stuff. I don't think that's going on too much, but companies are still offering a lot of specials at this point because they want people to travel. But it's, he's right on that where it's much easier to travel. And I would also say like, in some cases it's actually incredibly cheap because if I wanted to travel like on plane from somewhere, like say from Texas to California, it's a really big expense and it's a really big trip. Going from where I live to Tokyo is just a couple $100.
It's just much more comfortable and safer for me to spend time there. So I can even sleep like this easily.
You can't take a nap and it'd be completely fine. There's always this negative stereotype about people sleeping on trains because it's like, oh, it's the karoshi culture and everything like that. It's like sometimes people are just really comfortable. Speaking from experience, it's like it's real easy to nod off on a train and it's real easy to nod off on a Shinkansen. Because of how good Japan's public transport is, you could live almost anywhere. Even though I lived out in Inaka, I was never too far away from going to anywhere exciting.
Number 9. Walk up.
The last little point there, actually the trains in the Kansai area actually have individual seats too, and they're super comfortable. So I am definitely guilty of falling asleep on the train as well.
A lot. Because you don't need a car and transportation is everywhere, it's just likely you walk a lot. Much more than in the US. I say that because I know This is a huge issue in the US, and I cannot count how many Americans told me this, which is totally no surprise. Again, you're gonna end up
Lies. I gained weight.
walking a lot, whether you like it or not. Especially if you are living in a big city like Tokyo. Not only that, you're gonna get plenty of healthier food, and you are likely to lose.
Lies again. You gotta get that izakaya life, man. And once you get to the izakaya life, or I'll tell you where people gain the most weight. It's cocoa curry. Cocoa curry is the death of people when they come and they start to use that as their diet. They will gain so much weight.
Weight, maybe effortlessly. In the US, I saw many people struggling to lose weight or stay healthy. Depending on your income level or environment, it's just too difficult in the US. So moving to Japan can be a great benefit for your health. To be fair though, not everything is great. For example, when it comes to food, this would be my concern. It's actually getting common recently, but still much less accessible. And in Japan, maybe you walk too much and your feet can't stand it.
The first time that I was in Japan, studying abroad, I did not prepare for this problem, and boy howdy did I freaking suffer for it. Blisters upon blisters upon blood blisters upon blisters. Every time that I go back to Japan now to visit, I make sure that I pack really thick socks and brand new shoes, because without those, my feet just shred.
Number 8.
Now, I might be different for this because I do lots of like hiking in the mountains and stuff, but I've never had that problem. I will say though that what one of my friends told me is that him being an English teacher, if you use the wabaki, which are the Japanese shoes that you use when you're in the Japanese school, and if you use those in all the time, you actually will mess up your feet pretty badly. So he actually has some major foot issues right now too that he told me about.
English. I know many American people don't speak a second language so well. So maybe they are really worried about this, which is totally understandable. But unless you're gonna live in a countryside, probably it's not gonna be a huge issue. As far as in Tokyo, for example, you can definitely get by without speaking Japanese so much. I think English is pretty much everywhere nowadays. You just need basic Japanese words like arigato or sumimasen, and that's already enough actually. And I don't think you have to speak so well, because we don't have much expectations about the Japanese skills of non-Asian Americans.
They have low expectations of our Japanese ability. They assume right away I have no Japanese.
Some people call that gaijin card, or it's more like...
I call it gaijin pass, but that's also for when you make a cultural mistake as well. But I think I disagree here. I think if you're going to visit Japan and you're going to be in Tokyo, having those two words only, I think you're going to be fine. But to live here for a long time and be able to, do your rent. This is if you're willing to pay for the services to have everything translated for you and have somebody do it for you, then yeah, you don't need the language at all. But if you want to do things yourself, you definitely are, that's going to be a huge barrier, especially when you're trying to find something, or you're wanting to go somewhere, or you want to do something specific. If you don't have somebody who speaks English, you're going to have to find somebody to help you for every single time you do that.
Like special treatment for non-Asian.
Not to mention if you get lost too.
Foreigners. I know, it's not necessarily advantage actually. I'm sure some people take it negatively. But because of that, at least when it comes to language barrier, you don't need to be too nervous if you are non-Asian Americans though. At least when you just go shopping or talking to a salesperson. Of course, if you don't have a deep discussion or make close friends with native Japanese people, it might be a big issue for the first few years. But hopefully over the time, your Japanese is getting better, as long as you don't stick to only non-Japanese. Because living in Japan, you are more surrounded by Japanese people and language in daily basis. And I think this is a great benefit for any Japanese learners.
So I would actually say in opposition to that, a lot of people actually want to use their English and they want to practice. So sometimes you actually won't get as much opportunity to speak your Japanese as much as you want. Now in my case, that happens sometimes. Like if I go out to eat at a restaurant and one of the younger waiters or waitresses, they'll try to use English with me, and then I'll use English with them. But actually most of the time when I'm out, if I engage and speak in Japanese, those people will also speak back in Japanese, but there are a lot of times, like in the bigger cities, where like Tokyo, people will want to use English with you.
7. American image. When you go ask Japanese people what countries they like, these countries are probably top of the list, especially given the fact many Japanese people want to practice English. On the other hand, if you are from either of these countries, I have to feel sorry for you, to be honest. You might get unpleasant treatment or even discrimination because of your nationality sometimes. Now, it's not like Japanese
That's very true. I hear it all the time where that happens.
people instantly like you just because you are American. That's not gonna happen. But because American image is pretty positive and we watch American movies or celebrities a lot, I think many Japanese are at least curious or interested in America.
The US and Japan have historically had a really long and deep relationship. Our countries and cultures have been intertwined for a really long time. So I think it's natural to be interested in each other.
Probably many people want to know about your country or culture, and that would be a great conversation starter, right? So you might actually have easy time when it comes to making friends or interacting with other people. And that brings us my next point. Number 6.
Yeah, if you guys don't know the history of between China, Japan, and Korea, actually Linfamy has of the history of Japan, and you can see how many times Japan has went over to Baekje at that time, the southern peninsula of Korea, southern portion of it. So lots of great history to be had there.
Friends. Don't get me wrong, making friends in Japan isn't easy. But if I compare to the US,
I will say that is actually very true. Making friends in Japan is actually very difficult. I've been really fortunate where because I play music, I have to collaborate with other people, so I can meet koto players. But actually most of my friends are like twice my age, so that's another thing too, is that finding people that are around my own age who want to hang out is actually a little bit more difficult, just because they're not interested in the things that I'm interested in. I'm sure that most of the younger Japanese people don't want to sit around burning incense and playing shakuhachi, or something like that. I think they'd rather go out, and I'm not interested in the downtown areas as much as I'm interested in going like hiking in the mountains, or going to visit a shrine or a temple. So
Japan is still better, in my experience at least. Now, it doesn't mean American people are bad, unfriendly, or anything like that. Actually, in my experience, American people are much friendlier, so I had a much easier time when it comes to talking to people or having a small talk. But here's my impression.
Yeah, I think to illuminate this point a little bit more is that with Japanese, you can easily talk to people and have small conversations, but to break the barrier and become friends where you're invited over to their house or you're inviting them over to your place, that takes it takes a lot more effort than it would in America. Like when I make friends in America, and I do have friends, believe it or not, and when I make those friends, it would be, oh, you like this and you like that, great, dude, we're basically brothers now, you just come over to my house whenever you want. And not everybody's like that, of course, but for me and my friends, that's how we've been. We get close really quickly.
Americans are way more spontaneous and flaky at the same time. So they are often like, I'm just not in the mood today, so I won't go there. Sorry, I just changed my mind for no reasons. So when it comes to hanging out or meeting, being late or even ditching me happened much more than in Japan. And because of that, keeping friendship was...
I think that's the same. I don't think that's... I think that might just be his individual experience, but I would say that it's about the same level in Japan for me as it is in America.
It's quite tricky for me. Anyway, in my experience, even though making friends is easier in the US, losing friends is also easier in the US. I think Japan is opposite. Even though making friends is harder, once you made friends, those people are likely to be lifelong friends. And that's why we tend to stick to the same friends for a long time and not connect with people outside of the bubble.
Japanese people are almost always in our own circle. We do not invite other people inside the circle. So I have friends, high school friends, college friends, but my high school friends never meet my college friends, and we do not introduce our boyfriends and girlfriends. So we do not widen our circle. So it is extremely hard to get new friends here in Japan.
When it comes to tendency of people,
I don't know about that. Maybe like in terms of like in the Japanese, like being Japanese and living in Japan, I think yeah, I can definitely see that. But I don't think that I'm like as a foreigner. I think going back to his gaijin pasu or that we don't fall into that same sort of category because they're already view us differently and they want to be friends. They want to be speaking and practicing English. So I don't think that you're necessarily locked into a circle unless you join like a specific group. So let's say you want to study martial arts and you join this group, then you'll most likely be kind of stuck in that group and you won't be able to get outside of that. But I haven't had this specific problem that he's mentioning. Actually, interestingly enough, I have a lot of groups that I do join or people that I am hanging out with. They ended up knowing a lot of my friends over in the Kanto area that are doing Japanese music.
This is also what I found. Number 5. Less politically sensitive. So living in Japan, I can talk about politics much more freely. I'm not gonna have to lose any friends, career, or anything regardless of my political stance. Because I think most people are not politically sensitive or trying to be overly politically correct. The thing is, I talk about politics all the time in Japan with my friends or co-workers, and that's totally fine. So I was doing the same thing in the US, bringing up these topics, and just giving my personal thoughts or opinions. I thought that's totally okay, just like in Japan. But doing that, you know how stupid I was. I offended.
So I'll tell you, there's two ways to lose friends in America. Monopoly and talking about politics. The way you lose friends in Japan, Monopoly.
So many people and instantly lost many friends in the US. Simply because I talked about politics and disagreed sometimes. Now this may sound really weird, but I have to use a lot of tatemae in the US. Much more than in Japan actually. Because
so tatemae doesn't necessarily mean lie, but maybe just to hide the what he's actually feeling. So there's two different ways of behaving in public. There's tatemae and there's honne. So honne means your real voice, like your real thoughts, your inner, what you really believe. And then there's the tatemae, it's just how you act. So a good way to view this in America, like how we have it in our culture, is you act differently at work than you do at home. And so that way of acting in work where you don't express anything, you don't express certain beliefs, you don't say certain words, you don't say certain things, and you act a certain way, that sort of control of your I wouldn't even say ego, but the way you control your actions out in public is normal in Japan, that you would just do that always. And then if you were going to express yourself, it would be honne.
Because I'm too afraid of offending people or losing my friends.
I miss talking about politics and things like that in Japan because people didn't take it so seriously. I wish I could kidnap the
Yeah, the other thing is though, is that what he just said, they don't take it seriously. I bet you that a lot of people don't know who their local government, officials are here or who's running. And I think that like the last like election that they had, like even the local election here, I think like only like 28% of people went out to vote. So it's not even that they are okay to talk with it. They won't even know what to say with it because they're not following it. They don't really, I really don't think they care. Even from like the little conversations I've had with family and friends here, people just don't care.
Concept of wa and just drag it into the United States and apply it here, because this is one of the great lessons that Japan taught me, was how to look at other things that you may not agree with, but at least think about them. They work in such harmony. The United States does not work in harmony. When it comes to politics, everyone is very concrete about where they are. They don't consider why people think the other way. That's why politics are so hot in the United States, because we as a people are very self-centered. We just kinda are.
Keep in mind, it's obviously not everyone. I actually know many Americans who are open-minded about different political opinions. But when it comes to that, this is what I noticed. Number 4, not pick a side. So when it comes to stating your opinion, in Japan, you don't have to pick a side. You have no pressure about that whatsoever. So not many people go extreme, left or right. This is partly because of the education in my opinion. And of course, there are pros and cons about that. But because of that, I feel...
I do some work with a education company here called Mudita. And we actually talked about this specifically, of how there isn't a debating culture in Japan. And it's interesting because when you ask, I've had my friends who told me about this, like when they're asking kids to, defend their point and argue how their point is better than another student's point, it's actually really difficult to get them, and sometimes they just don't know what to say, they don't know what to do.
It's easier to get along with other people in Japan. We tend to not strongly agree or disagree, and I think that helps us have less conflict in human relationships. Now,
but then when you do strongly disagree, and sometimes that happens, that's when the friendships break, or when the actual drama happens.
it's not like we don't have any opinion on anything, but we just try hard not to make someone upset and don't want to be ostracized. And I wouldn't say that's benefit for every foreigner moving to Japan. But when it comes to America, they say the country is divided a lot. And if you really don't like that, maybe moving to Japan makes you feel much better. Because even politics aside, how Japanese treat other people is generally much more polite and respectful, especially when it comes to customer service.
Yeah, you go to Japanese McDonald's, it's like the completely different than America.
You're gonna see a huge difference in Japan. Number 3, cleanliness. Walking around in Japan, it's just so nice. I rarely see any trash or litter anywhere. I thought that's normal, so in the US, I was shocked by the huge difference. Especially in New Orleans and New York. I remember I was so uncomfortable just to be there. But in Japan,
I'll say though that Houston, and most of the places in Houston that I went and that I used to go to and used to hang out, they're very clean.
people willingly take care of their public space.
However, you can do all of your shopping on the Houston highways. You can find couches, TVs, refrigerators. So the highways, for some reason, people are always losing things off their truck. But in general, I actually believe that Houston was quite a clean city.
Surroundings, because we are taught like that since early age, and the habit is kind of ingrained into our mind. That's like a Japanese nature, which I really like about. Now, to be fair though, the downside is there are almost no trash cans on the street in Japan, which can be one of the big reasons why Japan is clean. And I think it's actually true.
To solve the problem for you, always when you go to like the convenience store or whatever, you have to remember to say, like they'll say "fukuro irimasu ka?" and you just say "onegai shimasu," because you can use that bag as your like little mobile trash can, and that it will be really helpful, especially on like a hot day and you're trying to walk around somewhere. You're gonna get a leftover water bottle, just throw it in there, and then later you can when you find another vending machine area or another convenience store, you can go in and then throw away that garbage.
I know, as a tourist perspective, maybe you don't like that, because probably you go shopping or buying food a lot. But as a resident's perspective, I would rather prefer the streets are clean, because I just feel so good when walking or running around on the clean streets like this. Number 2, less expensive. Most people believe it's opposite. Japan must be super expensive country, right? The reality may be different, my friend. Of course, this depends on so many factors like small city or big city, or what kind of lifestyle you choose. So it definitely doesn't apply to everyone. But at least in my experience, living in Japan is actually cheaper because of 2 reasons. Number 1, health insurance. So if you often go see a doctor or clinic, probably you're gonna have to pay much less in Japan. Number 2, rent. Of course, it is not cheap in Japan. Especially in Tokyo, it's rising a lot as more and more young people and foreigners move there. But even despite of that, turned out, Japan was still cheaper if I compare to the US. And this is what many of my Japanese friends moving to the US told me. I'm sure that's not every state or every city in the US. But as far as in Japan, whether rent is cheap or high, at least it's safe in most cases. You don't have to buy safety when renting an apartment, because everywhere is safe. Of course, not everything is cheaper in Japan. There are actually many things that are more expensive. But if these two take up a huge percentage of your living expenses, living in Japan can be much cheaper.
I have a professional...
So before this guy talks, I would say that definitely it matters where you are. So if you want to have that big city life, if you want to live Kyoto, Osaka, Tokyo, it's going to be really expensive. Everything, and even groceries will be more expensive. Gas will be just like if you live in more expensive areas in the States, those areas are going to be more expensive as well. So gas will also be more expensive when you're living closer to a highway. Gas stations farther away from the highway are cheaper. So, but I will say definitely that my rent, especially for the lifestyle that I'm living, I live in a really nice large house, but I'm also in the countryside. It takes me about an hour to get to Osaka. But then again, I'm coming from a perspective of Houston, where it took me an hour to drive downtown anyway. So if I wanted to go downtown, if I had to go to perform a concert, I was already traveling an hour every single day. Or if I had to travel and fly to another state to do a concert, it was an all-day event before I could actually perform it. Most things here, I can take a Shinkansen the day of pretty much anywhere I want to go to, guarantee a seat, and I can do the concert that day. So I would say that if you're outside of Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto, lifestyle is going to be much cheaper, but you also have to consider of how you're going to work as well.
White collar job, and I could never live in New York. You live in.
I could barely survive in New York. If I wanted to actually have like let's say if I wanted to have the same living standards as here, we're talking I'd need millions and millions of dollars.
Tokyo, which is clearly the most expensive city in Japan. I've lived in Tokyo too, and when I lived there, Tokyo rent is, I think, pretty comparable to rent in Baltimore. But imagine how much more money you would have to pay in Baltimore to live in a place as safe as Tokyo, to live in a neighborhood as safe as one of the Tokyo neighborhoods. That would be astronomical, like huge costs. Yeah, I agree, Japan's not that expensive.
To be fair, I should mention the downside. Japanese apartment is usually much smaller, and having a pet is gonna be harder than in the US. That would be concerning for sure. But if you are okay with this, moving to Japan may be better for you.
Since it was smaller, it was easier to regulate temperature. It is definitely cheaper. I always tell people, I'm like, if you can just get to Japan, the rest of it is pretty inexpensive.
Number one.
So in my case, living in an old home, it's much bigger. I have like thousands of square feet, and I have 11 rooms. So I have 11 rooms, living room, dining, and kitchen. That is extraordinarily too expensive to heat and to cool. So actually now I have my windows open because the weather outside is nice, but I don't use my air conditioning or heater as much as I can. I use it as sparingly as possible because we had one bill in January during the really cold times where we had to have heaters running because it was freezing and it was super cold inside the house, and our bill was $500 for that month for electricity, and that was just electricity. So if you're not expecting that, the electricity is a lot more expensive in Japan.
Safety. This one reason alone may be already enough to convince you to move to Japan. Of course, crime exists in Japan. It's never perfectly safe. And maybe you argue that, is Japan mentally safe? That's actually a good point, but at least Japan is physically safer, much more than the US. Actually, all Americans in Japan I've met said this confidently, and I don't think that's coincidence. In my experience at least, this actually happens a lot in Japan, and nobody steals your stuff at a cafe or anywhere, which I feel is amazing.
I don't know if I could say that's the biggest benefit, but that's definitely a really important tangible benefit. Even in my beloved home city of Baltimore, I often felt unsafe. And in fact, I often was unsafe.
Now please keep in mind, Japan is not perfect at all, and we have many problems.
Yeah, so I for most of them I agree. It's extraordinarily safe. Now he has a video about let's see, I wonder if I can find it, where it's like why Americans shouldn't move to Japan. I believe that's the other one that he has. I wanted to watch that one too. Let's see. Yeah, see there's the one right there. It's this one. Alright, I'm gonna go to the Gaijin perspective really quickly, and I'm gonna go to his, I wonder if he has the original videos. That's tiny URL. So how come I can't find that one? Okay, so let's just copy paste and then You can do this one. He has two of them.
Hey, what's up guys? So before we get into that, let's keep in mind these two things. Number one, what I'm gonna talk about doesn't always apply to every Japanese person or every place in Japan, because this is based on what I see in Japan and my personal experience. You're gonna have a different experience and perspectives about Japan, so I'm sure you're gonna disagree a lot, but let me know after watching this why you disagree. Number two, this is not for discouraging you from coming to Japan, and I'm not gonna be just ranting about how disgusting Japan is. It's more like I want you to make sure if Japan fits you and you can go well in this country. If you only watch TV shows or magazines, the impression or message you often get is Japan is great, it's a perfect country. We all agree Japan is awesome and interesting, but you need to acknowledge both good and bad, especially if you are moving here. And these can be the reasons you shouldn't move to Japan. Number 10. Weather. Now this totally depends on where you live right now, what country you compare with. But at least to me personally, Japan doesn't really have a great weather. As you already know, it's quite hot and humid in summer, and I really hate it. Some people even die because of that every year. Then winter must be great in Japan? Not so much actually. Of course, Japan doesn't have a too cold winter like Chicago or Minnesota, but the Japanese building or apartment can be really cold in winter because we don't have central heating, which is quite common in the West, and many people just rely on AC, so it's only partly warm, not whole building. In addition to that, we have quite many earthquake, tsunami, typhoon, or that kind of natural disaster. Number 9, having a...
Okay, so in terms of the weather, yeah, the summers here are absolutely brutal, but you get used to it. Just like you when you move anywhere, people like from, say, I've had friends that grew up in Alaska, but then they live in California now, like Southern California. And, at first, like, the summers were brutally hot for them. But, after living there for a couple of years, they were totally fine. So that's just, individuals adapting. The one thing that he did mention, though, is that the no central heating. So especially living in a house like this one, over 100 years old, there's also no, insulation either. So again, with that weather getting cold and getting really hot, your electric bill is going to go up. So the weather can cause it to be really expensive. Now in Nara, it actually doesn't have as many natural disasters as other places like Kobe or Osaka, where typhoons and earthquakes are a lot more frequent. So that is another thing. Where your work is going to take you will also have a really big effect on your livelihood for that. If you move up north and to live into Hokkaido, it's going to be cold, very, very cold.
Pet. Of course, you can have a pet in Japan, and you're gonna often see those people
but it's really expensive
at the park. But if you live in an apartment in a big city like Tokyo, it can be really difficult. Now it depends on what kind of animal you want to have. If it's a small pet, probably it's more likely to be okay. But still, many places in Japan are not so welcome about bringing a pet. Not just apartment, but also hotel, cafe, and so on. Even if you are allowed, they usually require extra money, like 20% more. And keep in mind, Japanese apartments are quite small, maybe too small to have a pet. And the walls are often thin, so maybe your neighbors are not happy and you might get a lot of complaints if your pet is quite noisy. In the end, Japan is not really a pet-friendly country.
So classical piano improvisations asked a good question. Do people mind if you play flute in the park? What about busking? Busking you can do, but you actually need a special license for it. And playing flute in the park is fine. But I don't really do that as much because people will come up to you and bother you. So if you're going to try to actually get serious practice in, it's not good. But if you're trying to get the attention and trying to spread your brand, then it's a good place to do it.
Country, and it can be a big issue if you really like to have a pet. Number 8, smoking. Now this is a non-smoker perspective. I'm sorry if you're a smoker, that would be a different story. So in Japan, smoking outside is not usually allowed, except for a certain specific area. Smoking inside,
people still break the rules.
It's more likely to be okay. Like in a station, restaurant, hotel, or cafe, they usually offer some smoking rooms or areas. My biggest issue is, however, it's often not really separated, and you might...
Hey, what's up, Good Japan, Bad Japan? Yeah, the smoking thing inside too, I think it might... this is from January 13th, 2020, before the pandemic stuff, but I don't really see a lot of people smoking inside.
Have to deal with second-hand smoke while eating, which can be really annoying, but it can be much worse. When I was working for a Japanese company, I often had to go to izakaya with my boss, and they started smoking just next to me, and I'm almost dead. And I was really wishing Japan didn't allow people to smoke inside. Number 7, job hopping. Of course, depending on your industry or profession, but usually this is considered quite negatively, at least compared to Canada.
Yeah, I have friends who, when they're leaving a job, they have a very hard time leaving one to move to one, and sometimes they'll actually keep working at the old job while they start the new job until they can break it to their boss that they're not working there anymore.
For example, now when I say this, it's not like just 2 months or 3 months. That would be too bad in any country. Even if you have worked for 2 years, 3 years, or even 5 years, that's still not enough, and you are considered like not loyal or patient. And in the end, you might have a really hard time of finding a new job. So at least from my experience, the pressure you can't quit a job even if you really don't like the company is quite strong. By the way, according to a survey, Japanese are less likely to ask a higher pay, and they just deal with it. Maybe they feel guilty about that. To be fair, nowadays it's quite changing though. It's more and more common. And again, it depends on your industry. In some industries, it's quite common and acceptable. So maybe you wanna consider that when you look for a job in Japan. Number 6, unnecessary overtime work. Probably this is no need to explain. I seriously think that this is really bad for Japan.
This doesn't apply to me because I'm it's how much I'm my own boss, so this doesn't apply to me, so I can't really talk about this. But good Japan, bad Japan, what they don't say is think about how many people sink their savings into family home that will keep them in one spot for eternity. Yeah, that's another thing too. People do they'll have a home built, and actually those homes, once you've lived in them for a long time, they have like zero resellability. Like Japanese homes only last about 40 years. They're really poorly constructed.
Benefits. Even though more and more companies and government start doing like this, the pressure is still quite strong. Like I said, I often had to go drinking with my boss after work. I felt like it's an obligation because everyone else was going there. The same goes to overtime work. I really didn't like that. At the same time though, I didn't want to be the first one leaving the office, and I'm seen like a lazy worker. I'm sure many Japanese still feel pressure like that. Having said that, freelancing is getting common in Japan recently, and more people having a flexible work lifestyle. See, you don't have to work for a company, and you can be self-employed. Maybe that would be your best choice in Japan. Number 5, no willingness to be.
Yeah, so for in my case, I only do things with shakuhachi and performance and stuff like that, so that it makes I have a lot more time. Because that's so I can do things like I can study. But you know, for most people, a lot of people come here and they do English teaching and they're working 40 hours a week. And then you have to remember you have stuff that you have to take home and you have to grade papers and things like that too. So it is pretty time consuming to, you know, you're working a full-time job every single day and you have take home, and then you have business obligations outside of that, like going to these meetings with your boss and going to different things. That's a real thing even for English teachers.
Be better. What I mean by that, seems to me most people don't care about Japan. Especially young Japanese are totally indifferent about the society, politics, and own country. Again, Japan is a wonderful country, but we have so many cultural issues. Definitely these programs should be addressed, and we need to start working on them. But we rarely have any meaningful conversation about that. People just look the other way and no willingness to fix it. Now, I'm not saying we have to be too focusing on the politics all the time, but it's quite depressing me honestly. How could we improve the country if the people have no interest about the country? In Japan, public opinion often doesn't reflect the government decision. It's often not what people actually want, but people just don't care and are not serious about choosing the representatives.
Another thing about this too is like talking to my Japanese friends and asking them why they don't vote is they actually believe that their vote doesn't actually count. They believe that it's all rigged. They don't believe that the vote's real.
And these programs are likely to remain in many years. I'm not sure you really want to move to a country like that. Number 4, Japanese are fake nice. Now, it's nothing wrong with just being nice or polite, but when I say fake, they don't mean it. Sometimes completely lying about what they actually think in mind.
You can never trust Japanese people.
Now, it doesn't mean Japanese people treat you disrespectfully. A lot of times, it's actually opposite. When you ask them for directions or something, They can be really kind, friendly, and willing to help you a lot, even if they don't speak English well. But for example, what if you need to work with them and really need honest feedback or conversation? So here's what happens quite often. You've done something not right on the job and your coworkers noticed. Rather than telling you that directly, they go to the manager and tell him about your mistake. And the manager sending you an email about your mistake, even though his desk is just right there. It sounds crazy, but this is actually not so uncommon. People are just too afraid of saying something directly and honestly, and they don't know how to handle conflict. And a lot of times, Japanese people are just being passive aggressive, especially if you.
That's what I was gonna say. As soon as he got to the point, I was gonna say no. I don't think it's necessarily about not being wanting to help, because I think that especially if you have seniority, definitely people are gonna tell you how to do things. That but they will try to sabotage you in a way when they want to get ahead of you. So it's getting ahead through sabotage, which is not exclusively Japanese. People do that in American business all the time too. Good Japan, Bad Japan says, I hate that garbage. Anytime there's a problem, a third party has to get involved in my business. Yep.
If you're a foreigner, maybe they are more likely to be.
For Japanese people, you can take 5 different people and the person is going to be acting differently with all of them. Where is the
Yes, but they do that in America too. That's not just Japanese.
true person's personality? And you can never know that. And that's why it's very difficult to trust. You can know the person for years and know nothing about. That's the biggest complaint I have.
Number 3, Japanese don't get sarcasm.
Oh my god. As somebody who speaks with sarcasm often, this is probably my biggest problem.
Now, it doesn't mean they have a low IQ and don't understand any jokes, but the Japanese people have a unique and different sense of humor, just like British people. And sometimes you totally don't understand why they are laughing.
I like how he says just like British people. Every country is going to have different, right? You know.
Or not laughing. It's quite frustrating me sometimes, because when I was in Canada, we just make fun of each other and joke about it, and that's totally okay. That's what friends do each other, right? But in Japan, people take it too seriously or even get offended by that. To be fair, I used to be like that because I didn't have this kind of concept at that time. Anyway, you might be quite frustrated because your humor doesn't work in Japan. Number 2.
All right, so if you guys know the show Impractical Jokers, where they basically, the four friends that get together and basically they make people each other do stupid shit and then they, punish each other. My girlfriend my wife finds that to be the funniest thing in the world. So because it's like an individual torture, right? It's like those people they have to do something that's like super hidoi. But in Japan, like if I was to talk to like how I talk to my friends in America to how I talk to them, which is, you put each other down in like a brotherly way, it just doesn't fly. It just doesn't work well. So he's very right about like how that is here. But again, that's everywhere you go in the country, they're going to have, or every different country in the world, they're going to have different cultural standards of what's okay and what's not okay. So when you move to a different country, the idea would be to immerse yourself in it, not to try to stick out and say, I'm not going to change my American ways when I live to Japan. Well, then you're going to set yourself up for failure, obviously.
It's hard to make friends. Like I said, you can't really trust what the Japanese people say. So you maybe have.
So I don't like that he's saying that you can't trust what Japanese people say. It's like, if you meet somebody for the first time, like how much of them are you going to trust? You have to like gauge whether or not you're going to put that trust in. What are you going to get out of it? What kind of relationship do you want from this person? But just to say that you can't trust Japanese people, and I know he probably doesn't mean it as a blanket statement, but I think he's referring to what he mentioned earlier, which is that honne and tatemae. So that because Japanese people are using tatemae a lot, which is not what they really think, it's not what they really believe in, but it's the way that they feel that is socially appropriate to act at this very given moment, it's hard to break that barrier.
Having really hard time of telling who are your real friends. Everyone seems superficial. And the thing is, most Japanese people in Japan grew up in Japan, surrounded by Japanese people, and familiar with Japanese people only. It can be really hard to integrate in that kind of society and make real friends.
Yes, it's extraordinarily difficult. You have to basically change your way of thinking to Japanese way of thinking. And how do you do that? Is by trial and error. You're going to make mistakes. people are going to get upset with you, and then you have to learn from that mistake. And so if you're a type of person who's going to make a mistake and it's going to like eat at you forever, and you're not going to be able to get past that, and you're going to give up right at that moment, Japan's not that place for you. But if you're willing to make that mistake, learn from it, and then go, okay, that's no good here, go on to the next one. Oh, that's the mistake, that's no good, okay, go on to the next one. Keep learning, because you can't expect people to tell you exactly how to act in Japan, and what's going to be appropriate, what's not appropriate.
So
But that's why there's videos like this.
truth is, most foreigners, as far as I know, they just hang out with other foreigners.
Not everything costs less, Jeff, from the exchange rates. One of the big things too is saying like, just like depending on where you are in Japan, things can be a lot cheaper. But yes, right now the exchange rate is good, and it's positive for me. Especially for me, I still make all of my money in USD, not in yen.
Yes. In most cases, they don't have any native Japanese friends. Not just because of language barrier, but it's more like because of cultural difference. I actually often hear that Japanese people are too used to their own culture and not willing to understand any other culture. So let me...
I don't think it's that. They want to understand. They want to actually learn the language. They want to be a part of that. It's hard for them to break outside of their own cycle, but they shouldn't have to because they're in Japan. So for me, it's my job to become more Japanese because I'm living here. So I need to assimilate to their culture, not the other way around.
Let me ask you, do you really want to move to a country you can't be friends with any of the native people? Maybe
Well, that's... 言い過ぎる.
it's not a big deal for you, but I would be quite sad about that. It all comes down to this. Number one, separation between Japanese and non-Japanese. It's not just like white people or black people, but even many Asians, like Koreans or Chinese, who have been living in Japan for more than 10 years, complain like this. Now, needless
Not even 10 years. Generations of families.
to say, not all Japanese treat you like that. Some people like me don't even care you are Japanese or not. But compared to the US or Canada, where I used to live, I can say this for sure. Many Japanese don't treat non-Japanese in the same way. And they make a clear distinction. So people are overly nice or polite and treat you like a 5-year-old child. Or they can be really rude or offensive, like staring at you all the time, judging you like that.
Now, I'm like the only white person that lives in my area. There are a few others, I've seen them, but because you can see them clearly. I mean, I live out in the Inaka, but I also wear Japanese clothing because of my job and of performing and going to temples often to do services and whatever. So it makes sense for me to wear this clothing, and so that really grabs a lot of attention from people. Okay, so good Japan. I can speak Japanese, but I found it's because so many people are too private, and you have to hope that someone has time to hang outside out of overtime with their own families. Yeah, so we're lucky that our family actually lives right next door to us too, so we actually have people that we can always go to. And actually, the person that I hang out with the most here in Japan is not Japanese. He's actually an American who's been living here for 20 years. So I can definitely vouch for like this finding time for people. They are really busy. Even some of the koto players that I work with, I can only really meet them once every other week if I'm lucky.
Just based on your looks or nationality. Even if you speak fluent Japanese and know about Japanese culture a lot, some people still treat you like that, and you might feel excluded a lot. Again, do you really want to move to a country like that? Like I said, Japan has so many great things.
I think another thing about this too, though, is that even like, because I'm very specialized in one area where I know a lot about Japanese traditional music, and I play that stuff, and it's my career, and I have a degree in it and everything. I think that there's a little bit of, I don't know if it's like a hazukashi or like being ashamed of that a foreigner knows more about it, but I really don't think it's that. But there is a bigger thing here in Japan, which is jiman. So jiman means to talk about yourself, or to up yourself and make yourself appealing to the other person, which is really popular in America. It's really common. You have to state what you've done and what's built up your career and what makes you the why you should hire me, basically. In Japan, you don't do that. You have to find other ways. You have to show them without being jiman. without showing off. Show them without showing off, and that's actually a really, really difficult thing to do, and just trying to be humble as possible. And that's really difficult for Americans when even just saying, oh yeah, I've done this before, or oh yeah, I've had this before, or oh yeah, I've done this, that even that little bit of just kind of saying that on the side is viewed as a negative thing.
As a country, but you shouldn't focus on them only. If you move to Japan, you need to acknowledge the negative aspect as well and really think about your happiness. Do that. Maybe you're gonna realize Japan is not the best country you wanna move to. It's not big.
Okay,
hey, what's up, guys?
So again, every place in the world, and I think everybody who's watching this live stream with me, we all know that like everywhere, nowhere is perfect. That's ridiculous. And to say that like Japan's gonna be like your safe place or your safe haven where nothing bad happens, it's it's complete. To use the English example, it's complete bullocks. But there are even him saying like it's hard to make friends and whatever. I think a lot of people say that's very difficult to make friends out like in America as an adult. It's hard to meet people. It's hard to like establish that opening friendship. Things are expensive, things are not expensive, where you live and all that kind of stuff. So I actually, a lot of the problems that he's saying, I could flip it around and put it on to Japanese moving to America.
So I was planning to give you this type of content, but when I left a comment like this, turned out quite many people want to know even more about the negative side of Japan. It kinda makes sense though, because nowadays, so many great YouTubers already keep telling you a lot of positive things about Japan. Actually, I can give you more reasons to move to Japan than not to move to, but maybe that's not what you want and you already know how awesome Japan is. Anyway, I'm assuming I've got you guys' permission to make this video, and I really hope it's gonna help you somewhere. But let me make this clear before we get into that. Something I didn't mention in the previous video. A lot of things I'm gonna mention are mainly comparing with Canada, simply because I used to live there and it's easier for me to compare than other countries. Japan has many problems and you might feel discouraged a lot, but before you just giving up, you might wanna try to figure it out. The thing is, you're gonna face some hardships in any country you move to. Before I went to move to Canada, she gave me this message. It's important to give.
So actually he has a list here. So actually, because this video has already been kind of long, I want to just go quickly over these. So he said, okay, so 10, returning purchased goods and refund is not a given. Well, yeah, but the place will tell you whether or not, returned purchased goods is a given or not. That's the same in America as well. Rent is rising in many cities. It's everywhere in the world, though. Getting a driver's license can be very hard and time consuming. Okay, yes, this one is really, really tough. But again, though, if you really live far out in the middle of nowhere where you absolutely need a car, well, that's kind of shogunai. But in this case, for me, I actually would rather not have one just because of how expensive a car is and like the yearly fees that go along with it. The cars themselves are not that expensive, but everything that goes along with it is. More and more elderly people, it's not necessarily a problem for me. I don't know why that would necessarily be an issue. People are really non-religious, and they can be prejudiced a lot too. Yeah, so if you are actually, I've been to South Carolina and I've done some performances there. There's an easy way to get along with my friends from South Carolina, and that's just you open up a bottle and you hear that everybody's your friend. So non-religious can be prejudiced a lot. Yeah, Japanese are very suspicious of religion in general, because of like they have a lot of like small cults in Japan, and the ones especially from the 90s that caused a lot of problems have left a really bad taste for Japanese people. Not many job options unless you speak Japanese well. Yeah, yes, I can, but that's up to you. You can get better at Japanese. That's something. If you're going to move to another country, you're going to want to learn the language. I have been here with people where they don't speak Japanese at all, and they've been living here for many, many years. But they are usually doing some other sort of work that actually doesn't have to do. They're freelance. Okay, dating can be different and very difficult. Okay, speaking as a man to everybody, like man to man, dating's hard. Okay, Japanese criminal system is broken. Criminal justice system is broken. I don't know about that. I would say that it's kind of unbalanced on certain things. There are many parts that are not well taken care of, but overall, I think there's not much crime. So I mean, how can you say it's broken when there's not that much crime? Because I don't know. That one I'd have to think a lot more about. The Japanese mannerism is complicated. Yes, but you'll get through it. You'll learn how to learn those different things, where to walk on the side of the road, or which side of the road to walk on, how to excuse yourself from different situations, how to pick up on those things, where he talks in this next one, which is reading the air, the invisible unspoken rules, which they also call KY, not to be confused with KY intense, but KY means kuki yomenai. Kuki yomenai means that you're not reading the atmosphere, like read the room. And everything like that's a normal human problem. Some people are better at reading the rooms than others. Now, of course, in the Japanese, they have their own built-in non-verbal communication that you'd have to study and learn. But it would be thought that you would probably have seen Japanese TV, have watched Japanese dramas, have gotten into Japanese animes where those things are brought up. And in the Japanese case, the Japanese are watching that, they go, oh, KY, it's like a kuki yomenai. They don't understand what's happening right now. There's that really embarrassing moment that the Japanese are feeling on behalf of that character in the show. If you watch those movies and you start to develop that sense and you go, oh, okay, I see why this is wrong. In the Japanese mind, they feel this way. Okay, a couple comments here. Let me actually change up the thing, because we're done with the video watching, and so we'll just pull it up on front only for a second. So Good Bad Japan has a couple things. Good Japan, Bad Japan. I'm into, and even though I have technical skills, I was recently turned down because they expected level beyond N1. Yeah, and that's pretty common too, especially if you're going to be working in a place where you're going to do like interpretations or anything like that. They just want perfect, and at this day and age, they are able to ask for that. Because there are a lot of people who are getting better and better at Japanese. There's becoming more people that are being able to speak Japanese, so the market is becoming more difficult. Good Japan, Bad Japan also writes, I'd be better to attack the court system in general, like how the divorce couples don't get joint custody of children. Okay, yeah, now that is, yes, you are exactly right. They are favored to women in that case for the children. If there's any divorce case, the men are not getting the child, no matter what. You'd have to basically escape the country with the kid. I think regarding air is BS. Somebody at the top is always dictating how people should act. It should be watch the leader and follow. Yeah, that's really solid advice, actually, because in Japan is a nation of followers. It is people who are going to be in a hierarchical system, and and it happens like that in the in American workplaces too. I mean, everybody knows the guy that sucks up to the boss. Everybody's trying to make good friends with the boss. They want to be working with him. But as soon as one of those pack leaders within that hierarchical structural turns against that person, everybody starts to turn against that boss. So then the same thing happens in Japan too, but it's just much more intense in that direction. And there's a lot less instant kind of turn the other cheek. It's everything moves slow in Japan. Everything moves very, very slow. And so one of the things that my friend who's been living here for a long time told me is that be patient. Because if you want to get something done, let's say in America you could get it done in a week. Okay, it takes 10 weeks in Japan to do it. And I like to say that, like, my little joke for all my students is that Japanese are the most proactive. What is it? Hold on. They're the most proactive procrastinators around. So they'll say they're going to get something done in 3 weeks, right? And so nothing will get done the first week, nothing will get done the second week, but then that third week, everything magically gets finished. And so you feel like on edge. The first week nothing's happened, second week nothing happened, the third week now they're just starting it, and it makes you feel like, oh my god, this thing is never going to get done, this project is never going to get finished, and then it magically gets done in that time. So it's kind of if we said I need 3 weeks to finish this project, we would be starting it at week 1 and going all the way through the end of week 3 working on this project, where in Japan it's the other way around. One of my students actually mentioned in his workplace, one thing that frustrated him a lot in the workplace was that one of his Japanese colleagues would try to find a solution for something, and they would try that solution, and then what would happen is they go, oh, it just doesn't work. and that would be the end of it. And then they wait for somebody else to do that job, and to find that solution for it. But I think that one thing is, anytime you're ever going to move to a different country, or to into especially a culture that's so diametrically opposed from your own, you've got to learn those things. You've got to learn how to behave in the country. Not all the laws are the same here in Japan as they are in America. So some things that you do could actually be illegal, and you can get a fine for it. For example, this might be a rule in America, I'm not sure, but you actually are not allowed to text or use your phone when you're riding your bike. So, or even have headphones in. So even if there's no music playing, they're assuming that you're listening to music, and you can get a ticket for that. So just knowing like those small things are really important. Yeah, so if there's any questions about that, but I really wanted to watch those the videos and kind of give my take, because I think that all the videos are really good that he has, and I think they make really good points. A couple things of like whatever, but oh yeah, that's right, even carrying an umbrella while riding a bike is no good. You're not supposed to do that. But I'm sure good Japan, bad Japan, you see it all the time too. People do it, so everybody does it as well. But anyways, this was a fun little hour of just kind of going over the reactions of this. I like there's a lot of really good content in it, so definitely go and check out the videos, and I will see you guys another time for I'll see you guys another time, maybe for more Shakuhachi related things. All right, see you guys later. Bye bye.